12 men came through that corridor to kill the queen. 12 men were still breathing when I let go of the last one. That was the part nobody in the room could process, not the fight, the aftermath. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and it wasn't fear. It was how hard I'd been gripping down on what I wasn't letting myself do. 6 months earlier, a trial marshal had ordered me to hit a target at 10% as a joke. Nobody was laughing now. They kept asking me the same question, standing over 12 unconscious men in Dominion-issue restraints, and I still didn't have a clean answer. I could have ended it in 3 seconds. Why did I choose the slow way? Let me back up. The Corvath Dominion keeps one ceremonial guard from every allied species standing at state functions. It's a treaty clause nobody remembers writing and nobody bothers to enforce. A courtesy post filed somewhere between the flower arrangements and the seating chart. When the human delegation submitted a candidate, the Dominion's placement office ran the standard intake and stamped him exactly where every other species' honorary post got stamped. Combat nude. Soft tissue. No natural weapons. No augmentation. No plating. Decorative only. That candidate was me. I'd spent 9 years as a restraint instructor before the posting. The kind of job that doesn't translate well onto an alien intake form. I taught soldiers how to grab another person hard enough to stop them and not hard enough to break them. Nobody in the Dominion's placement office read that far down the file. Why would they? The header said combat null, and the header was good enough for a job that mostly involved standing very still next to a throne in a hall built for beings twice my height. The Dominion capital is carved into a cliff face the color of rust, corridors tall enough that every species honor guard fits without stooping. And mine was the only post with a ceremonial armor had clearly been resized down from something meant for someone bigger. I noticed that on day 1 and didn't think much of it. I took the post because it paid well and nobody expected anything from me. Both of those things turned out to be true for exactly 6 months. Queen Elizur COR met the new honorary guards individually, which I later learned wasn't standard. Most reigning Corvath delegate that to staff. She looked at my file for exactly as long as it takes to read a file properly, longer than anyone else in the placement chain had bothered, and said, "Combat null. That must be restful. Very restful, Your Grace," I said. She almost smiled, a shift somewhere in the pale lattice under her jaw, gone before I could be sure I'd seen it. Good. I have enough guards who take the job seriously. It's nice to have one who can simply stand there and look ornamental. I told her I'd do my best. I meant it at the time. Neither of us had any reason to think it would matter. For 3 weeks, that was the whole job. I stood at her left shoulder during audiences, learned the names of the other honorary guards, a Thren scholar post, a Vrekan war cousin on ceremonial loan, a scarred old Corvath duelist who'd earned his spot the hard way and clearly resented sharing a line with someone who hadn't. Court staff were polite to my face and openly curious behind it. I overheard one aide describe me to another as the soft one from the quiet planet, and didn't correct her because as far as either of us knew, she was right. I remember standing there in formal dress, surrounded by ceremonial weapons I'd never be asked to use, wondering why a Dominion this cautious about its security bothered with a human guard post at all if it genuinely believed the header on my file. I found out 3 weeks later at the Qualification Trial. So did they. The Qualification Trial is a formality. Every species goes through it, stand at a marked line, strike a calibrated target, get a number, get filed. The Dominion's top combatants put up numbers that make the target scream. I watched 3 of them do it that morning. A Thren duelist whose hand spines left grooves in the alloy just from the wind-up. A Vrekan war cousin on loan from a neighboring system who hit with his whole body weight behind a single downward strike. And a Corvath honor guard with forearms like architecture, whose punch made a sound I felt in my sternum from 15 feet away. Full output. 60, 70, 80% of rated ceiling. The target's alloy skin glowed orange where they hit it and cooled and glowed again. Then it was my turn, and the trial marshal, a Corvath named Asakel, dry-voiced, visibly bored, 3 trials behind schedule and unbothered by it, looked at my file, looked at me, and grinned at the room like she was setting up a punchline. 10%, she said. We don't want to explain a dead honorary guard to the delegation. It was a joke. Everyone in the room laughed, including me. I rolled my shoulder, set my stance the way I taught 1,000 recruits to set theirs, and through a strike I'd have called warm-up intensity on a slow morning back home. The alloy cracked. Not scorched, not dented, cracked. A hairline fracture running 4 inches up the plate. The same plate that had shrugged off the Corvath Honor Guard's Real effort an hour earlier without so much as scoring. The room went quiet in a way I'd learned to recognize over the following months. Asakel walked up to the target, ran a finger down the crack like she didn't trust it to be real, and looked at the sensor readout like the number had personally insulted her. Run it again. I hit it again. Same output. Same control. Another crack, parallel to the first, close enough that the two together looked deliberate. She read the numbers out loud to the room, and this is the part that mattered. Not the crack, the number. 62 units of force, unaugmented, soft tissue. No plating, no biological weapon of any kind. The Corvath Honor Guard's full output strike, the one that made the target scream and the room go still the first time, had registered 58. My joke 10% had out-hit their real everything. That is not possible, Asakel said. Not to me. To the sensor, like it owed her an explanation it wasn't giving. It's 10%, I said. I can go higher if you want a real number. Nobody wanted a real number. Not yet. If you've ever had a room go quiet around you for reasons you didn't ask for, tell me about it down in the comments. I'd genuinely like to know I'm not the only one this has happened to. Word moved up the chain faster than I expected. By the next morning, Guard Captain Threo Van was standing in the doorway of my quarters, arms crossed, looking at me the way you'd look at a structural crack in a building you were responsible for. Threo had run the Dominion's ceremonial guard for 11 years. He didn't like surprises, and he liked combat null surprises even less. He requested my full file, not the placement summary, the real one, the Restraint instructor records from home, and it took the delegation 3 weeks to pull and translate them. When they landed on his desk, he read the relevant section aloud in the council chamber, in front of the Queen, like he wanted witnesses to share the discomfort. Age 6, he said. Controlled strike fundamentals. Graded. Pass or fail. No exceptions for age. He flipped a page. Age 11. Full contact sparring restraint certification. A child striking another child, and the entire discipline being tested is how much of the strike they hold back. Another page. Age 17. Instructor track qualification. He looked up. You people teach children to hold back a punch the way we teach ours to walk. More or less, I said. Why? Because an untrained human is dangerous to other humans by accident. We don't have plating. We don't have a warning system. So we build the control first, and the strength gets handled along the way. I shrugged. We're not taught to hit harder. We're taught to hit exactly as hard as we mean to. Harder was never the hard part. Threo looked back down at the file, then at me, like he was trying to make the two versions of me match. Not to hit harder, he repeated slowly, like the words cost him something. To hit exactly as hard as you mean to. That is what this entire file is teaching 6-year-olds. He closed it. I have never once had to teach a soldier restraint as a discipline in its own right. Only as an afterthought to strength. He didn't look satisfied. He looked like a man recalculating a threat assessment from scratch, which, to be fair, he was. 2 days later, he came back alone, off the record, and asked me to demonstrate on him personally. Not a target. Him. Grip my wrist, he said. As hard as you would to restrain someone my size, without breaking anything. I want to feel the number, not read it. I told him that was a bad idea. He told me he'd survived worse ideas. So I took his wrist, the way I'd take a recruit's during a control drill. Firm, immediate, a fraction of what I was capable of closing down to, and held it there while he tested the give, pulled against it, found none. I can't move it, he said. He sounded almost offended. You're not supposed to be able to. That's the whole exercise. How much of your ceiling is this? Less than the target trial. He was quiet for a long moment, flexing his wrist after I let go, watching the color come back in a skin that hadn't actually been hurt at all. I have spent 11 years assuming the dangerous ones announce themselves, he said. Loud strikes. Visible ceilings. Something to measure. He looked at his own wrist again. You are the first threat I have ever met that I could not find the edge of by asking it to try harder. Queen Ilizar Soar hadn't said much through any of this. She'd read my full file before the trial even happened. The only person in the placement chain who had, and she watched the exchange with the particular stillness her species does when they're deciding whether to be curious or alarmed. Corvath's skin runs a shallow lattice of chromatophores just under the surface, and when Ilizar Soar is rattled, it shows before she says a word. That morning, the color along her throat darkened 2 full shades and stayed there through the entire session. 6 years old, she said finally. It wasn't a question. It was the number lodging itself, somewhere it wasn't going to leave. I want to be fair to the Dominion here because their disbelief wasn't stupid. Earth doesn't look like a species that needs a discipline like this. We don't have claws. We don't have venom. What we have is a nervous system that can put a fist through a door in under 1/5 of a second, and no biological governor telling it when to stop. So we built the governor ourselves. Every combat sport we ever invented has a version of it. A boxer taking it easy on a sparring partner half his size. A black belt controlling a throw, so a training partner lands soft instead of broken. A surgeon's hand steady to a fraction of a millimeter around something that would kill the patient if it slipped by a hair. A mother catching a falling toddler with exactly enough force to stop the fall and not bruise the arm doing it. None of it is instinct. All of it is drilled, logged, graded, exactly the way Threo read out of my file. Thousands of hours spent making sure the body does less than it's capable of on command every single time without exception, because the one time the discipline slips is the time somebody gets hurt for no reason at all. I didn't say all of that to the council. I gave them a short version. It's the part that never quite lands until someone sees the number for themselves. If you're new here, I tell stories about humans getting underestimated by people who never needed a discipline like ours. If that sounds like your kind of story, subscribe, more coming. Not everyone in the Dominion reacted to the number the way Threo did. There's a rival house, Ithra, an old family with a long memory and a longer list of treaties they never wanted signed. And their envoy to the court, a Corvath named High Warden Dressel Corvain, raised the matter formally at the next full council, 3 weeks after Threo's wrist test. You have a weapon standing in your inner ring, Dressel said, filed as decorative, that can out-hit our own honor guard without trying. I am not questioning his intentions. I am questioning the judgment of a government that allowed an unaugmented variable of that magnitude past its own intake process by accident. He has done nothing but stand where he was posted, Ilizar Soar said. Today, a discipline is a choice, your grace, renewed every single moment it holds. I'm asking what happens on the day it isn't. Dressel turned to the room. House Ithra does not oppose the human treaty out of malice. We oppose handing any single individual, any species, the capacity to end this court in seconds and calling it ceremonial because he hasn't yet. It wasn't a cartoon threat. It was a fair question asked by someone who believed it, and I understood, listening to it, that Dressel wasn't entirely wrong to ask it. Threo didn't argue the point. He just said, quietly, that he'd spent 11 years assuming the same thing about every guard on his roster, and none of the rest of them had ever handed him a reason to test it personally. The council didn't rescind the posting that day. They also didn't close the matter. Dressel's motion stayed open, unresolved, sitting on the calendar the way a fault line sits under a building everyone still walks through anyway. The state ceremony 3 weeks later was the kind of event that exists mostly so delegations can be seen agreeing to things in public. The Great Hall was full, a dozen species in formal dress, banners from every allied house. The kind of crowd that makes a security detail's job either very easy or very hard, depending on what's actually coming. Ilizar Soar stood at the dais in ceremonial plate she never wore for comfort. Threo had his people on the outer ring, watching the doors the way he always watched them, and this time watching me too. Just once a look I understood as I still don't fully trust the math, but I trust you. I stood 3 steps behind the queen's left shoulder, exactly where a decorative guard is supposed to stand. You look tense, Ilizar Soar said quietly, without turning her head. Occupational habit, your grace. Ornamental guards don't usually have those. I told you I'd do my best to look the part. She didn't answer that. Later, I understood the pause was her noticing, the same way I had, that the service corridor behind the east banner hadn't been on Threo's checked list that morning. The breach came from that corridor, 12 of them, armed, moving in a formation that told me they'd rehearsed this more than once. Threo's outer ring was still turning when the first two were already past it, and I had already moved. I'm not going to walk through the next 90 seconds in detail. I don't think it would tell you anything the numbers already do better. What I'll say is that a restraint discipline built over 20 years doesn't switch off because the stakes are finally real. If anything, it's the only thing in you that keeps running clean when everything else wants to stop thinking and just react. I moved the queen behind the dais with one hand and met the first two with the other. I remember counting the way you count repetitions in a drill, not out of calm exactly, but out of habit, standing in for calm until the real thing catches up to it. 12 of them came through that corridor to end a treaty they were afraid of. 12 of them were on the floor when it stopped, restrained, breathing, furious, and alive, and the Great Hall was so quiet in the aftermath that I could hear the banners still moving from the draft of the broken door. I didn't decide that outcome in the moment. Not really. I'd already decided it at 6 years old. In a gym I barely remember, the first time an instructor told me control was the entire discipline and strength was just what happened to come along for the ride. They ran the forensic reconstruction in full council 2 days later. Every sensor log from the corridor laid out for the room the way Osakel had laid out the target readings months before. A Corvath analyst read it aloud because that apparently is how this Dominion processes things it doesn't want to believe, out loud, in front of everyone, so nobody can claim afterward they didn't hear it. Estimated peak output during the engagement. 9% of subjects demonstrated sealing. A pause. The analyst visibly rereading the line before continuing. At full output, forensic modeling indicates all 12 combatants would not have survived the first 4 seconds of contact. Modeling further indicates a non-zero risk to Dominion security personnel within the same corridor, given proximity and combat density. The room was quiet again, the same quiet as the trial. Except this time nobody laughed first, and High Warden Dressel Corvain, sitting where he'd sat 3 weeks earlier arguing the exact danger of the room, had just watched proven and then not happen, said nothing at all. Ilizar COR was the one who finally spoke, and the color along her throat had gone dark and stayed there through the entire session. He did not fail to kill them, she said. He decided not to. Threo didn't argue with her. He wrote something down instead. And I found out later it was the opening line of a formal review. The Dominion's first serious motion to strike combat null from the human treaty classification, post by post, embassy by embassy, across every allied court that had filed a human guard exactly as lazily as mine had been filed. Dressel's motion stayed open on the calendar for another week before he quietly withdrew it himself. I spent that night in the infirmary, not for anything the 12 attackers did to me. For a strained tendon in 2 fingers from holding a grip at a fraction of the force it wanted to close with, for longer than any grip is built to hold back on purpose. Ilizar Soar came to see me personally, which I understand is not standard practice for a reigning queen visiting a courtesy hire's infirmary bed, and which I never once mistook for anything other than what it was. Respect, professional, and plainly stated, nothing else. She looked at the ice pack on my hand, and then at the guard roster reports still stacked on the side table. 12 names on it, all 12 of them alive to be processed, and something in her expression came about as close to amusement as chromatophore skin gets. The most dangerous person in my dominion, she said, is currently injured from not hitting something hard enough. 12 for 12, I said. That's the job. I flexed the hand, Wince put the ice back. Hitting harder was never the hard part. Threo leaned into the doorway before she could answer, a data slate in hand, looking like a man who'd rather be anywhere else delivering this particular news. 3 more allied embassies have filed requests today, he said, for human guards. Specifically, they're using your name in the paperwork. That's a terrible precedent, I said. It's an accurate one, Threo said, and left it at that. Ilizar Soar watched him go, then looked back at me, and for once the lattice under her skin sat still. No alarm, No calculation, just the ordinary color of a queen sitting in an infirmary long past when she needed to be there. We're not taught to hit harder. We're taught to hit exactly as hard as we mean to. If you've ever had to hold something back because letting go would have cost more than it saved, you already understand why that's the harder discipline. Let me know if you've got a story like that. And if you want more of these, the subscribe button's right there.